So Nightreign is my first ever Souls-like and I have no friends to play it with. This video will go over everything Nightreign has to offer from the perspective of a complete newcomer. I've added timestamps so you can skip around, and if you just want a structured, spoiler-free verdict, I recommend jumping straight to the summary. But everything else, it's my personal journey on how I came to the summary. That said, this video will contain gameplay spoilers. Now I've seen the reviews on this, 77 on Metacritic and a 6.4 on user score. That's pretty bad, but after personally trying it, I actually don't agree with this. The game definitely has some major problems, but in the end, as a newcomer to the genre, I really enjoyed it, and that is what matters. Let's start from the top. I've never played a Souls-like before. I know they're iconic, especially Elden-Ring. The world, the art, the atmosphere, I absolutely love it all. But the combat, that's always been the deal breaker for me. I never liked the idea of having to fight the same boss over and over again just to memorize a moveset, especially when the entire combat philosophy revolves around dodging, timing, and punishing openings. It just never clicked for me, unless it's a co-op. I'm really into MMORPGs and the Monster Hunter formula, and I think it's because the pain and satisfaction are shared with the team. I like the companionship. You fight together, win together, and you get to build synergies, mix playstyles, and all that good stuff. So when I saw that Nightreign leans heavily into co-op, I was immediately intrigued. It's like Monster Hunter meets Souls-like, and honestly, that blend hooked me. The setting is not the only difference here. It borrows from a bunch of genres. Combat and setting from Elden-Ring, co-op structures from Monster Hunter, shrinking map mechanics from battle royales, randomized loot and runs like a roguelike. So you have a hub, similar to Monster Hunter, from where you navigate which boss you would like to fight. Once you select the boss, you now matchmake with 3 players and are dropped into the map. This map starts to shrink with time, limiting the area you can work with. The same as any battleground game. All the loot and equipment is random for every session, following a roguelike experience, giving you a fresh feel to every run. Every run has 3 days with the boss at the end of each day. This is so you can prep your character with sufficient levels and items by fighting and looting the map. Once you finish a day, the circle resets, leading to the 3rd and final day for the main boss fight. This is Nightreign's core. At first, I was very skeptical of this design, but the experience this blend offered was unexpectedly fun. I launched the game fully expecting to suck, and the game did not disappoint on that. The tutorial itself had killed me twice. Thankfully, you're not forced to beat it. I miserably failed, then got a brief bit of lore and was dropped into the main hub. Yes, there's a story. It's serviceable, not exactly cinematic, but it gives context to the loop. There are a few cutscenes, but nothing close to what I would call emotionally resonant. And as for the ending, I had no clue what was going on. I'm guessing someone familiar with the Elden-Ring lore might appreciate it more here. Story-wise, as a new player, it's really not there. Anyway, being new to the entire genre, I hit up the training grounds. Here I checked out the different classes. There are 8 playable classes, each with distinct playstyles. You've got the tanky dude, the bird knight with a shield, a summoner girl, a mage, and a couple of more. Now, having yet to be comfortable with the controls, I thought the best course of action would be to play something simple and easy to pick up. See, after my experience in the tutorial, my game plan was simple. I had absolutely no clue what to do. Elden-Ring is beloved with over 30 million copies sold. There would be someone who knew what they were doing, and shamefully, I completely expected to get carried. I decided to try my best not to be a burden. So, I went with Raider, chunky, solid, and his ultimate seemed team focused. My logic, even though I'm trash at the combat, maybe I can support the team and not actively drag us down. I dropped into my first expedition, we fought a few mobs, hit level 2, then my expectations got crushed. We just roamed around without any sense of objective or direction, and right after, all 3 of us died to the closing circle. We didn't even get past day 1. Run 2 was a lot better. Someone on the team seemed to know what they were doing, pinging objectives, guiding us. We made it to day 2, which felt like real progress, but the luck didn't last. I kept playing for about 3 more hours and just could not replicate it. I was still stuck on the first boss. That's when I realized I can't rely on being carried. I needed to learn to play, how to actually play the game. Here's the real issue. The game doesn't explain itself at all. No direction on objective, no explanation of builds, no tips on what gear to go for or how to play your role. I had no idea what I was doing until I eventually checked out YouTube and came across the visual guide. And honestly, the guide is pretty detailed. It breaks down characters, weapons, passives, map objectives, mechanics, almost everything the game has. But the game doesn't tell you to look at it. And if it does, it's buried somewhere because I completely missed it. Right after this, I had better success. With the knowledge I just got, I was less of a liability. I picked up the right weapons and passive, understood the purpose of my character better. I aimed to clear the field bosses, the forts, the castles. If there were no pings, I took the initiative to provide a sense of direction. I still suck, mind you, but I was still getting better. It took me 8 whole runs to beat the first boss and unlock the actual game. What I learned is that the game does a very poor job of actually teaching you how to play. You're pretty much left to figure out things on your own, and unless you're already familiar with the Souls-like mechanic, you'll most likely end up relying on third-party guides, learning through sheer trial and error, or by watching the more experienced players on your team. I think the community would call this homework framework in gaming that has its own charm, but as a fresh brand new player, it can be incredibly overwhelming. There's no real system in place that eases you into the mechanics, no tutorial that properly holds your hand, at least not until you've already suffered through enough to understand the basics. So moving on, I had built some momentum and I was feeling very confident. I don't know if it's just me, but the second boss, Gaping Jaw, is brutal. No matter how many times I got to it, I just couldn't clear it. And this is where I really started to understand the importance of enemy weaknesses. I knew about them before, sure, but knowing just wasn't enough because I'm not alone. There are 2 other players in my party. They need to know it as well. And here's where the second major issue hit me pretty hard. There's no real way to communicate outside of pinging, which helps, but it isn't enough. There's no real system for coordination. Sometimes I would ping an objective, but it was too far, so my team would go somewhere else instead, which isn't wrong, but it also doesn't change the fact that we need to head to that certain location that drops the reward, which is crucial for the upcoming fight. Now you could argue I could go there myself. However, at this point of the game, I was still terrible. I couldn't handle it solo. Now admittedly, communication can be a hit or miss. I get it, this is Souls-like. It's challenging, it's team-based, and when things go south, frustration happens. It can bring the best in us, but also the worst. And I say this as someone who spent over 10,000 hours in Dota 2. I know how quickly team games can spiral into toxicity. But despite that, I still believe most players would prefer some kind of communication, whether it's voice chat or simple text, just something, because with that, the game would be 100 times more enjoyable. Veteran players could guide newcomers, newbies could actually ask for help, plan, and share ideas. You would have more synergy, more clarity, and ultimately a much better co-op experience. Eventually, after 11 unsuccessful attempts, I ended up skipping that boss and moved straight to the next 2 bosses, and here's where I picked up a few more lessons. Now, I didn't find them particularly difficult. In fact, both were cleared on the first attempts. I would like to tell myself it was a team effort, but in hindsight, I did learn a lot from these encounters, more so from the second fight. This boss had flight, and more importantly, it had a wipe mechanic where range damage was absolutely essential. Earlier, I've realized how important it was to understand enemy weaknesses. This time, I learned 2 more things: the importance of team composition and how weapon choices can impact your entire run. For example, I now understand why having at least one fast weapon is always a plus. Even if the weapon itself isn't of a higher grade, it lets you revive your teammates faster. Now, one of my teammates was using this massive axe, and it had a unique ability that turned it into a chainsaw. That chainsaw form let them revive insanely fast. And this is also where I realized there are iframes in this game. See, the first time the boss wipe mechanic triggered, I died instantly. No clue what hit me, but I noticed my iron eye survived. That's when it clicked. He must have iframed it. I realized his ultimate must have iframes baked in. Then it happened again. We cleared the first drop, and this time there was a second drop. I noticed my ultimate was up and it worked flawlessly. This was the point where I started to appreciate the combat. At the start, I said the combat system was the one thing holding me back. It looked boring to me. However, this time I felt differently. Now, I can't speak for the Souls-like in general, but Nightreign, it has some depth, and more importantly, it started to feel rewarding. I had clutch moments where quick thinking genuinely mattered. I learned about breaking enemies. I learned that when I'm out of stamina, I could jump heavy attack to regain pressure. I learned to use my retaliate ability to restore stamina, and that's just one character's toolkit. Yes, the combat is still pretty simple compared to other action RPGs, but it has just enough depth to make it fun, reactive, and at times even satisfying. Next up was the third boss, and I found this one genuinely challenging. There was just way too much going on, visual clutter, attacks from all sides. I couldn't keep up. By my third run, we had a raider in the team, and this raider had hard carried the entire expedition. I don't know how else to put it. The man was a unit. He was taking massive hits, barely going down, staggering enemies left and right, and if I remember correctly, he only died once. Compared to my other runs, it felt like the boss wasn't even trying. The encounter was faster, smoother, and all of it thanks to this one guy. At the end of every expedition, the game shows a post-run summary, and this raider, he had nothing in his inventory, just one great axe. That's it. No relics, no secondary weapons, just a man and his axe. This run changed my perspective completely. Yes, Nightreign has roguelike mechanics. Yes, the bosses have elemental weaknesses. Yes, your gear can go up to yellow tier. And yes, smart team compositions and synergy will give you the edge. But here's the thing, we don't need all that. If you understand your weapon, master your timing, and learn the boss pattern, that is all that actually matters. That's the beauty of this design. All the roguelike elements, they're not required. They're here to optimize and customize your experience, not define it. The core gameplay underneath all of that is balanced and strong enough to reward pure skill, and I fell in love with that approach. Now, this philosophy might work perfectly for straightforward classes like Raider, but for others like the mages, I imagine looting and build crafting is a lot more important. Every weapon in Nightreign has its own active and passive ability. Mages rely on spells which burn FP, your mana basically. Managing that becomes crucial for DPS. You need to build yourself around FP region or you'll just run dry halfway through a fight. So for classes like mages, gear matters more and the roguelike system feels a lot more necessary. Now moving on, slowly but surely I was getting better, but once again I found myself stuck. Why? Because of two reasons. I didn't get a raider to carry me this time, and just like with Gaping Jaw, I failed to fetch an elemental weapon effective against the boss. I was down about 6 to 7 runs and it was starting to get frustrating. Naturally, by this point the loop should start to feel repetitive. After a while you begin to understand the optimal way to play, ignore the smaller side mobs, rush objectives with mini bosses, farm them for the best EXP and loot. And once you get into this rhythm, the roguelike structure only keeps things fresh for so long. Here's where Nightreign tries to up its game. See, after defeating each boss, you unlock new mechanics on the map. For example, you get something called the Shifting Earth, where portions of the world literally change. Regular zones transform into underground lava chambers, snow-covered peaks, toxic forests, or cursed castles, dramatically altering the environment and enemy layout. And that's not all. There are a lot of these kinds of mechanics that gradually unfold, adding layers of variation and challenge to the loop. And honestly, I think these are best experienced firsthand without spoilers. Just like before though, no tutorials, no guides, no indicators. You either learn through trial and error, or once again, you're off to YouTube to figure it all out. And at this point, that started to feel like a recurring issue. I moved on from this boss the same way I did with Gaping Jaw. And funnily enough, on my very next attempt, I cleared the next boss. There was no secret formula. I don't think I got carried. We weren't overgeared. We were just level 10. The difference? I had gotten better. People in general who are at this point of the game have gotten better. The team just knew what they were doing. Everyone played their part. We weren't gods, but we just worked together. And the boss, it was actually easier, bigger, slower, more cinematic, and a lot less chaotic than the smaller but faster ones I've been previously stuck on. This fight unlocked the true final boss of the game. But before I ran into that, I made my mind to clear my backlog. So I queued again and again and again. I failed every time. Sometimes I had bad teammates, sometimes we messed up collectively, sometimes people didn't stick together, sometimes players just quit after a bad start, and sometimes I was the problem. It was frustrating, but I couldn't stop because despite the failures, I was still having a lot of fun. The game is genuinely fun. Every single run, I learned something. Each one, even the worst one, felt like a step forward. And finally it happened, everything aligned. A solid team, level 14 by the time we reached the boss, and we destroyed Gaping Jaw. Within the next 2 runs, I went on to defeat my final backlog. It was the most chaotic and clutch-heavy experience I've had in this game so far. I'm quite proud of that run. This fight really made me realize that personally I've come very far from my first couple of runs. This made me realize the fun here is the challenge and the learning experience. From being absolutely trash to actually pulling off some clutch plays. Shortly, I took on the true final boss and it was a cinematic spectacle, but I won't spoil it. There's already plenty on display in this video. It took me around 25 to 30 hours to beat the game. My final stats are obnoxious. At the time of the video, I have 44 expeditions with only 8 wins. And I'm still playing, still queuing, and still trying out different classes. Now one last thing that I have to mention is the replayability of the game is not the best after you finish the final boss. The best you could do is try out new characters, that's about it. Also the challenge is much lower now because I noticed you tend to queue with players with the same progression as you. This means these players can now pull their own weight, making most of these bosses trivial. For a $40 game though, I found my money well spent. With that, we have finished most of what I think were important. Let's look at what we've learned. At its core, Nightreign combines the brutality of a Souls-like, the co-op hunt structure of Monster Hunter, a roguelike gear system, and a shrinking map mechanic like a battleground game. You go on expeditions, 3 days per boss, looting, fighting, and prepping for the big fight at the end. The game is clearly built for team play, and when you have a good team, it feels amazing, but the lack of voice or text makes coordination frustrating, especially with randoms. Communication is limited, which holds back the co-op potential. Solo is for those looking for a very tough challenge. The game teaches you almost nothing. All of it is hidden behind trial and error or third-party guides. It's rough for newcomers, but if you push through, it clicks. The combat in the game is simple, but deeper than it looks. Every character has a unique playstyle and every weapon has a passive and active skill. There's room for clutch plays and real-time decision making, not too complex, but enough to stay fun. The roguelike elements, relics, passive, tiered gear give the game build crafting, but for most classes, it is far from complex. The game is balanced well enough that skill trumps everything. If you're good, all you need is one weapon and a solid timing. Build crafting is there, but it's really not as deep as it seems. For the progression and variety, on your first playthrough, the game keeps things fresh with map-changing mechanics, random bosses, and environmental hazards. But again, most of this is never explained. You will only understand them through experience or research. Other than that, you have up to 8 classes you can enjoy. The loop starts to seek in after you have finished the game because now, the only thing you may experience are the other classes. And from here on, your teammates can also pull their own weight, which removes most of the challenge the game aims to offer, making the first playthrough even more magical in comparison. As a first timer to Souls-likes with no friends to play with, I still had a great time with the game. Yes, it was frustrating at times, yes I got carried sometimes, but I also learned, improved, and eventually clutched some fights of my own, and that felt incredible. As a new player, if you're looking for a co-op Souls-like that offers challenge, flexibility, and moments of triumph, but is comparatively easier at the same time, Nightreign absolutely delivers. It stumbles in onboarding, lacks proper communication tools, and expects you to figure out way too much on your own. It's the learning process, from being absolutely trash to getting good, from being a burden to being the very reason for success. It's chaotic, it's tactical, it's beautiful, and most importantly, it's fun. Worth playing? Absolutely. Just be ready to get your hands dirty first. That's it for me. Thanks for watching.